Good day. My name is Gustav James. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to what I have to say here today. This is the first segment of what I hope to be a regular interaction with you. The name of this program is Principles Matter, and I want to focus this first segment on the founding principles of the United States of America. I choose these founding principles for this first segment for several reasons. One, I consider the written founding principles of the United States of America to be possibly the most significant and most important statement ever put in writing by humankind. Two, I agree with these founding principles and I apply them to all of humanity. Three, I am currently governed by the government of the United States of America in full, blatant violation and total disregard of these founding principles. Four, I have personally spoken out on the matter of the disenfranchisement of the people of the United States Territories and Washington, D.C. many times in the past. However, my comments are always met with silence. Now I'm at the point where I am demanding a response from certain government officials, whom I shall identify within this segment. What are these founding principles of the United States of America? Principles declared on July 4th, 1776. Principles declared 246 years ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. These are the founding principles upon which I will dwell. These principles supersede the Constitution of the United States. These principles are the rock and temple of the great nation. And I submit that they should be the rock and temple of all of humanity. Unfortunately, from the beginning, there has been a willingness within the United States to violate these principles in the interest of expediency and profit. Principles can be viewed as perfect statements. However, adherence to principles is almost always imperfect. It is therefore the responsibility of the people who give their consent to be governed. It is the responsibility of the people to ensure that we continue to move towards the perfection which is our principles. Within the United States, there's plenty of focus on the Constitution. I, for one, highly appreciate the Constitution of the United States because I find that it is a very significant shield in protecting the common man from the whims of the various multifaceted government agencies and the politicians. But even though I greatly value the United States Constitution, I still stress the fact that the founding principles supersede that Constitution, and as you know, the declaration of the principles predate the Constitution by more than 10 years. We need to come to understand that the Constitution of the United States is the operating manual for the nation. It is a manual that is intended to be amended. The very specific process for its amendment is outlined within the document itself. Failure to amend this document, when required, is a failure to be competent stewards of the nation and its people. We have a responsibility to amend it in accordance with our current wisdom and knowledge. We have a responsibility to make the Constitution more closely adhere to the principles of the nation as we gain the ability to handle those changes, which should always move us in the direction of perfection with regards to the founding ideology. To think that we should operate and manage this nation without amending the Constitution written over 230 years ago is like attempting to operate a 2022 Ford F-150 truck with the operating manual written for the 1908 Ford Model T. We must amend the Constitution when required. This is our duty. So what is my problem? Why am I calling out the flawed United States Constitution? I am crying out for liberty. I want to be equal. I want to be equal to all you citizens on this planet who exercise self-determination. We, the people of the United States territories and Washington, D.C., occupy an inferior status. Most of us have been held in this inferior place for well over 100 years. Let us not pass on this legacy of inferiority to our children and our grandchildren. Please join me in speaking out against this injustice. Let us be clear. We do not need statehood in order to not be discriminated against. We do not need a territorial constitution in order to not be treated as less than citizens. We simply need to have the rights, privileges, and responsibilities afforded to all the citizens of all the states. For over 120 years, the people of Puerto Rico have been denied their rights under the pretext that they have to first settle the status issue, statehood, independence, or some bastard entity This is a lie. As long as the United States is the sovereign power in Puerto Rico, the people of Puerto Rico must consent to being governed by that sovereign power. They must have their vote. This is a primary founding principle of the nation. Unalienable rights do not depend on whether you reside in a state or a territory or a commonwealth or whatever your unit's designation may be. Unalienable rights are attached to each and every person on the planet. These rights shall not be alienated from the person. In accordance with these principles, we adults are not only entitled to participate, we are required to participate in whatever government establishes jurisdiction over us. This is our right and our responsibility. It has absolutely nothing to do with our piece of ground, with how our piece of ground is designated. It is solely based on who is governing, and as the governed, we must participate in the governing. We, the people of the territories, must consent to being governed, and the only reasonable way to obtain this consent is through our regular exercise of the voting franchise. We need three things, but before I list those three things, I must identify who we are. We are the people of the United States Virgin Islands. We are the people of Puerto Rico. We are the people of Guam. We are the people of the Northern Marianas. We are the people of American Samoa. And we are the people of Washington, D.C. We are more than 4 million souls. We are all disenfranchised. How can more than 4 million people be ruled without their participation in 2022? In a nation that calls itself a democracy, in a nation with glorious principles. I can explain some of this. We disenfranchised Americans are not oppressed. We are not abused or ill-treated. We are simply not treated as adults. We are coddled like children. We are governed as if we are dependent children, not yet mature enough to sit at the table with the adults. Our food portions are sufficient, and we sit silently by, waiting for whatever the adults bestow upon us. Shame on us! One misconception that furthers this acquiescence in the Virgin Islands is the belief that we receive more federal money this way than if we voted. My people believe that money that comes from the United States is a gift. They fail to understand that they are just as entitled to United States dollars as any American in any state. US dollars are just as much ours as theirs. The vast majority of United States spend more in federal funds than what is collected in federal taxes, making them financially equal to the United States Virgin Islands. We do our part in these United States, and we must demand that we are treated as equals. Regarding the US dollar, it is interesting to note that the one man most responsible for its creation and design was Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton was raised and trained on St. Croix here in the Virgin Islands. Alexander Hamilton learned about international monetary systems and trade while he was a teenager on St. Croix. A powerful hurricane that struck St. Croix on August 31st, 1772, caused the young Hamilton to put pen to paper in a letter to his father, describing the terrible storm. Hamilton's written account of the storm was so impressive that it caused St. Croix businessmen to decide that this 17-year-old young man needed to go to college. Hence, the people of St. Croix put money together and sent the soon-to-be founding father to the then colonies. 250 years ago, St. Croix played a major role in the founding of the United States. That Crucian, named Alexander Hamilton, became the first national treasurer of the great nation. That monetary system designed by the Crucian dominates the world to this day. So let's not be mistaken. American money is just as much Virgin Islands money as it is New York money. My fellow disenfranchised citizens of the territories and Washington, D.C., don't allow this injustice to continue. Speak up. Demand your rights. Take your rightful place among your equals. 3 things are required. We must be allowed to vote in presidential elections. 2, our representative in Congress must be equal to all other members of Congress. She must be able to vote in Congress. 3, we must be represented in the United States Senate. All states have 2 senators, but I would be satisfied with at least 1 senator because our population is far less than any state. Puerto Rico, however, should have 2 senators, and Washington, D.C. should have 2 senators. But the Virgin Islands, with our 100,000 people, we need at least 1 senator. Silence is not acceptable. I am saying that the federal government of the United States has no legitimacy in the territories or in the very place where it is seated. I am saying that the district courts of these jurisdictions lack legitimacy, that the district court findings should be null and void due to this lack of legitimacy. These are powerful charges that I am making, and these charges are always met with silence. No one has a counter-argument. In order for anyone to prove me wrong, that person must prove that we in the territories are inferior to those in the states. If you have such proof, if you believe that we are less than, please come forward and make your case. My people, perpetual childhood is not okay. Don't let this be our legacy. Honorable Stacy Plaskett, delegate to Congress, my friend, silence is not acceptable. You must demand our equal rights. Demand your equality. Demand equality for your constituents. There is no one in that house more deserving than you. No one in that house is superior to you. You must speak up. Every time you speak on the floor, every time a vote is called, speak out. Demand your vote. Honorable Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, District Commissioner, Puerto Rico. Silence is not acceptable. I was so distressed for my Puerto Rican brethren when the United States Congress, a body within which Puerto Rico has no representation. Appointed a supervisory board, a board called the Financial Oversight and Management Board of Puerto Rico, aka PROMESA, to manage and control Puerto Rico's affairs. That felt like insult added to injury. Ms. Gonzalez Colon, please speak out against your inferior status in that house. You are actually representing more citizens than any other member of that body. Perpetual childhood for Puerto Ricans is not okay. Speak up. Honorable Eleanor Holmes Norton, Delegate, District of Columbia. Your constituents get to vote in presidential elections, but they are not represented in Congress. You do not have a vote in that house. You are not represented in the United States Senate. Silence is not acceptable. Demand equality for your people. Honorable Michael F. Q. San Nicolas, Delegate, Guam. Silence is not acceptable. Honorable Gregorio Sablan, Delegate, Northern Mariana Islands. Demand equal rights for your people. It is your duty to do so. Honorable Amata Radewagen, Delegate, American Samoa. Demand your unalienable rights. Demand our unalienable rights. Honorable members of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, stop being silent in the face of such discrimination against people of color. If this is not important to you, then what is? All members of the United States Congress, you have a duty to try to adhere to the principles of our great nation. Silence is not acceptable. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal expert in any fashion. My profession is engineering. I am of the opinion, however, that this matter should be brought before the United States Supreme Court. I think that our Supreme Court has a responsibility to protect our unalienable rights, just as they have the responsibility to protect our constitutional rights. I'm calling out to the congressman from Maryland, the Honorable Jamie Raskin. I call on him specifically because I heard him on TV, and it is clear to me that he understands these points. And it is apparent to me that he's a very able lawyer. Therefore, I'm calling on Congressman Raskin to help our representatives to bring this matter before the United States Supreme Court. Congressman Raskin, silence is not acceptable. Thank you all for listening.